Welcome back to Room 57, your destination for the most gripping true crime stories. Today, we're diving into a case that shook the nation and has left people questioning how something so devastating could happen to an ordinary family. We're talking about the mysterious disappearance of the McStay family, a case that remained unsolved for long years. A family of forefather Joseph McStay, mother Summer, and their two young sons, Johnny and Joseph Jr., vanished from their home in Fallbrook, California, without a trace in February 2010. What happened to them? Was it a voluntary disappearance, or something far more sinister? For years, the McStay's disappearance baffled investigators, and countless theories circulated. Were they victims of foul play, or had they simply chosen to leave their lives behind and escape? Was it a runaway situation, or was it the result of something darker? The mystery surrounding their sudden vanishing would only deepen as new information slowly came to light, ultimately leading to a discovery that no one saw coming. In 2013, the McStay family's bodies were discovered in a remote desert location in Mexico, a place far from their home in Southern California. The discovery of their remains answered one question, but it led to many others. How did they get there? Who could have done this to them? And most shockingly, why was this seemingly perfect family brutally murdered? The man who was eventually identified as the killer was Charles Chase Merritt, a longtime friend and business associate of Joseph McStay. The revelation was chilling. Someone so close to the family had turned into the monster who ended their lives. But the bigger question remained: why was it over money, personal grudges, or something even more twisted? As we dig deeper into the case, we'll examine the theories that arose during the investigation, including the idea that the McStay family had willingly gone into hiding, leaving behind a community that had no idea what was going on. We'll explore how the investigation progressed over 4 years, the moments of hope, confusion, and the eventual breakthrough that led to the truth. But we won't stop there. This case has layers of complexity and hidden motives that are still being discussed today. The story of the McStay family is not just a tragic tale of loss, but a stark reminder of how the people we trust can sometimes be the ones who hurt us the most. It is also a story of resilience, the persistence of a community in seeking justice, and the harsh reality of how deep-seated issues can manifest in the most horrifying ways. As we go through the timeline of events and examine the details of the case, you will hear from those who were closest to the investigation, from family members to law enforcement officials, who were on the front lines of one of the most chilling investigations in recent history. But before we get into the heart of the case, let's set the stage by learning a little more about the McStay family and their life before the tragedy struck. The McStay family, a portrait of innocent Joseph McStay, Summer McStay, and their young children lived a relatively quiet life in Fallbrook, a small, close-knit town in Southern California. The family was known for being friendly, approachable, and very much like any other middle-class American family. Joseph, an experienced designer, had recently established a successful business, creating fountains and other custom water features for clients around the area. Summer, a stay-at-home mom, was devoted to her children, often sharing snapshots of her family life on social media, painting a picture of an ideal family. To the outside world, the McStays seemed like the perfect family, living in a peaceful home, raising the beautiful children, and working hard to build their future. But as we'll soon discover, the life they led wasn't as simple as it appeared. Like many families, there were challenges they faced privately, struggles that no one outside their home knew about. Behind closed doors, things were not as idyllic. Joseph and Summer, though seemingly happy, had their share of relationship issues. There were financial pressures, stress from running a business, and other personal issues that they kept private. But none of this seemed out of the ordinary. Many families experience these types of struggles. The big question now is whether these challenges played a part in what happened to them, or whether something far more nefarious was at play. The day they disappeared, February 2010, on February 2010, Joseph, Summer, and their two children disappeared without a trace. Their home, usually full of the sound of children's laughter, was eerily quiet. The doors were locked, their cars were parked in the driveway, and there were no signs of forced entry or robbery. The family simply vanished. There were no ransom, notes, no demands, no messages, just a quiet, empty home and a growing sense of dread among the people who loved them. The authorities quickly launched an investigation, but there were few clues to follow. Theories began to emerge. Some believed that the family had simply left for Mexico to escape their problems, maybe seeking a new life without telling anyone. After all, they had a history of traveling and had made trips to Mexico before. Was it possible they had decided to start over in a new country, leaving behind their home, their belongings, and their community? Other theories were darker. Was it possible that foul play was involved? Had they been kidnapped or killed? The fact that there was no sign of a struggle made it even more confusing. The authorities couldn't rule out the possibility that the McStays had staged their disappearance to start a new life, but as the investigation continued, something didn't add up. The breakthrough, discovery in Mexico for 4 years of uncertainty. In November 2013, the remains of the McStay family were found in a remote area in Mexico. The discovery came after a long and arduous search. But even as the authorities identified the bodies, the questions continued. How did they end up in Mexico? Why had they been murdered? The discovery of the McStay's bodies was a turning point in the case. For years, the family's disappearance had been treated as a possible runaway case, with no real indication of foul play. But the sight of their remains in a shallow grave was a jarring revelation. It was clear now this wasn't a family starting over in a foreign country. This was a murder investigation, and it needed answers. The next step was uncovering who was behind their deaths, and as the investigation progressed, one name started to emerge: Charles Chase Merritt, the family's longtime friend and business associate. Merritt's connection to the case would soon become the key to unlocking the mystery of the McStay family's tragic end. Conclusion of the introduction: a chilling mystery unfolds in this video. We will go through every detail of the McStay family's disappearance and murder, piece by piece, from their happy life in Fallbrook to their mysterious disappearance, and finally the shocking discovery of their bodies. We will follow the twists and turns of this chilling case. How did a seemingly normal family's life come to such a tragic end? What led to the ultimate betrayal by someone they trusted? Was it simply financial desperation? Or was there something even more sinister at play? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into this haunting case that has left a permanent scar on the community and the nation. Part 1. The McStay family. A picture of normalcy shattered at the McStay family. On the surface, seemed like a quintessential American family living in the quiet, suburban town of Fallbrook, California. Their lives appeared to be filled with peace, love, and success. Joseph McStay, a skilled designer, had recently started a small business specializing in creating water fountains and custom designs for clients. His wife, Summer McStay, was a dedicated mother to their young children, Johnny and Joseph Jr. The family was active in their community and often shared their lives on social media, where they were seen attending events, taking family trips, and showing off their beautiful home. But what did the public really know about this seemingly perfect family? Like many others, the McStays kept their personal struggles hidden from the world. While their online presence painted a picture of happiness, behind the scenes, they'd have dealt with financial difficulties, pressures from running a small business, and the challenges that come with raising the young children. Joseph McStay, although talented in his trade, had not yet hit the big time. His business was modest, and while it brought in enough income for his family to live comfortably, the stress of managing the day-to-day operations was no small feat. Summer, on the other hand, was a stay-at-home mom, devoting herself to raising their 2 sons. She shared frequent updates on social media, displaying the love and care she gave her family, making them appear like the ideal American household. However, like many families, Joseph and Summer's relationship wasn't without its share of struggles. They faced financial pressure and the burden of running a business. These challenges often tested their relationship, but nothing seemed to hint that it would spiral into something as devastating as what was to come. The reality of their lives was far from perfect, yet their commitment to each other and their children kept the family united. Though there were signs of the pressures they faced, there was no visible indication that their seemingly normal family life would be ripped apart in such a violent way. But behind the facade, tensions were quietly building up. The vanishing February 2010, February 8, 2010, began like any other day for the McStay family. Joseph went about his work, while Summer took care of the children. The family was planning their usual routine when suddenly, everything changed. That afternoon, the McStays disappeared without a trace. No warning signs, no letters, no messages left behind, nothing. The scene in their home suggested a hasty exit, but there was no indication of forceful entry or struggle. The family simply vanished. What was even more baffling was the fact that their cars were left in the driveway, and their personal belongings were untouched. It was as if they had walked out of their house with every intention of returning, but never did. The house was locked from the inside, and there was no sign of foul play at first glance. To all outward appearances, everything seemed completely ordinary. The only thing that seemed out of place was the absence of the family, leaving no trace behind. Neighbors, friends, and family were immediately concerned, but at the time, many dismissed it as the McStays perhaps choosing to leave their lives behind voluntarily. The town of Fallbrook wasn't the kind of place where anything remotely sinister would occur. The idea that this was a case of a family running away to escape personal problems was not out of the question. But could it really be that simple? Could a family just decide to leave without a word and vanish off the face of the earth? For the next few weeks, friends and relatives struggled to come to terms with what had happened. The McStays had always been the kind of people who kept in contact with those they cared about. They were well-liked active in their community, and constantly connected with friends and family. The sudden disappearance seemed out of character, but as the days turned to weeks, investigators began to search for answers. The initial investigation and the growing puzzling questions in the weeks that followed. Investigators combed through the McStay family's home for clues. The first theory they considered was that the family had somehow left on their own accord, possibly to start a new life, as there were no signs of violence at the scene. However, as the investigation continued, they discovered that the McStays had no history of financial or personal turmoil that would have led them to suddenly disappear without telling anyone. One of the most confusing aspects of the investigation was the fact that there was no sign of forced entry. The house, although empty, did not appear to have been robbed. There were no ransom notes, no messages, and no apparent motive for any kind of violent crime. The family simply disappeared without a trace. As investigators dug deeper, they found that the McStays' phone records and email communications showed no signs of distress or abrupt changes in their daily routines leading up to their disappearance. Summer's social media accounts, filled with pictures of her children and family life, painted a picture of a loving mother who had no reason to flee. Joseph's business dealings were modest, and there were no signs of any unusual debts or legal troubles. For all intents and purposes, the McStays appeared to be living a quiet, ordinary life. Yet, the more the investigators looked into the family's last known activities, the more questions arose. Had they voluntarily left the country? Could they have made arrangements to disappear, leaving everything behind in search of a fresh start? This theory began to hold some weight, particularly after it was found that Joseph McStay had a history of making business trips to Mexico. There were also reports suggesting that the family may have been planning to go on a vacation to Mexico around the time they disappeared. Perhaps they had simply decided to relocate, leaving behind their friends, family, and life in Fallbrook. But as time went on and the mystery deepened, investigators realized they needed to consider all possibilities, including foul play, the search for answers, theories, and roadblocks. As the weeks turned to months, there was no sign of the McStays in Mexico or anywhere else. Despite the initial assumption that they had left voluntarily, local authorities in California and Mexico coordinated efforts, and the case gained national attention. However, each lead that surfaced seemed to fizzle out, leaving more questions than answers. Then came the shocking discovery that would alter everything. In November 2013, after nearly 4 years of searching, the remains of Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. were found in a remote area of the California-Mexico border, buried in a shallow grave. It was the news that no one had expected. The McStay family was dead. Their remains were located in a desert area near the Mexican border, far from where they had been last seen. This discovery instantly ruled out the theory that they had simply gone off to start a new life. This was not an escape, this was a murder. The discovery of their remains sent shockwaves through the community. The investigation was reignited and new questions arose. How did they get to Mexico? Why were they murdered? And most importantly, who did this to them? End of part 1. The mystery depends as we continue our investigation into the McStay family's case. We will explore the surprising twists that followed this devastating discovery, from the questions surrounding the involvement of their longtime friend Charles Chase Merritt to the final confrontation in the courtroom. We'll dive deeper into the mystery of why a seemingly perfect family ended up as victims of one of the most chilling crimes in recent history. Stay tuned as we uncover the shocking truth about what really happened to the McStay family. Part 2. The mysterious disappearance. For years without answers, days following the disappearance of the McStay family vanished without a trace. In February 2010, the entire town of Fallbrook was thrown into shock. Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. were well known in the community, and their sudden disappearance left their neighbors, friends, and family members confused and desperate for answers. For weeks, local authorities investigated every possible lead, but the lack of evidence made it difficult to form any solid conclusions. In the days and weeks following their disappearance, there were several theories about what had happened to the McStays. Some people believed the family had voluntarily left, perhaps to escape some kind of financial trouble, though this seemed highly unlikely. The McStays were known to be a close-knit family, and there was no indication that they would abandon everything they had worked for, especially their children. Other theories suggested that they may have run away to Mexico, a place they had visited before, and there was speculation that they had chosen to start over in a different country. However, despite these theories, investigators weren't convinced. There were no signs of forced entry into the McStays' home, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. Their belongings were left behind, including cell phones, laptops, and even their vehicles. This suggested that the family hadn't simply packed up and fled. Instead, they had vanished, seemingly without a trace. It was at this point that investigators began to entertain the possibility that the McStays had been victims of foul play. This was the theory that most of their family and friends hoped was not true. But the mounting evidence made it increasingly hard to ignore. The investigation begins. Theories and initial discoveries as the search for the McStay family intensified. The police began to piece together the last known moments of their lives. They learned that the family's last known activities before they disappeared included a trip to a local hardware store where Joseph McStay purchased materials for his business. It was clear that there was nothing out of the ordinary during these last moments, and no indication that the family was preparing for anything other than their routine. Yet, as the investigation moved forward, questions about the family's finances began to surface. Investigators discovered that Joseph McStay had a history of making business trips to Mexico, where he worked with clients on various design projects. This led to the hypothesis that the family may have left for Mexico voluntarily, either to start a new life or to escape personal or financial problems. This theory gained some traction, as there were indications that the McStays had contacted people in Mexico prior to their disappearance, suggesting they may have planned to leave. However, as authorities began to look more closely at the McStays' financial records, it became evident that they weren't in any significant financial distress. They were not rich, but they were able to make ends meet. The theory that they had fled due to financial problems seemed increasingly unlikely. Furthermore, friends and family members insisted that Joseph and Summer were happy and content, with no obvious signs of distress. As investigators continued to dig into their personal lives, they uncovered another unsettling detail. The McStays had recently planned a family vacation to Mexico, but it was supposed to happen after the disappearance. The timing of this trip raised more questions about their decision to go there, or whether they had been forced into traveling against their will. A bizarre twist, new clues, and a long search for the truth as months went by with no leads. The case began to stall. There were no new pieces of information, and it seemed like the McStays' disappearance would remain a mystery. However, things took an unexpected turn in late 2013, when authorities began to focus on a new lead that would change everything. In November 2013, the remains of the McStay family were discovered in a remote area just outside the border in Mexico, an area known for being desolate and difficult to access. The discovery was made for years after the family had initially vanished, and it sent shockwaves through the entire investigation. The McStays were not alive. They were dead, and their bodies had been disposed of in a remote desert area. The discovery of the bodies brought relief to the investigation, as it confirmed that the family had not voluntarily left, as had been speculated. However, it raised more pressing questions. How did the family get to Mexico? Who was responsible for their deaths? And most importantly, why did someone want to kill them? For investigators, the most pressing question was the manner of death. The bodies were found in a shallow grave, suggesting that the family had been killed and buried quickly after their death. The autopsies revealed that the family had been murdered, but the exact details surrounding the deaths remain unclear at this point. Charles Merritt. The shocking revelations. Investigation into the McStays' deaths took a chilling turn when the authorities began to zero in on one suspect, Charles Chase Merritt. Chase Merritt was a longtime friend and business associate of Joseph McStay. The two men had known each other for years and had worked together on various projects. Merritt had been in regular contact with Joseph prior to the family's disappearance, and he was one of the last people to see the McStays before they went missing. In the early stages of the investigation, Merritt appeared to be a person of interest, but there was not enough evidence to suggest his involvement in the case. However, as more details emerged, investigators began to focus on him as the primary suspect. Merritt had been involved in the McStays' business dealings, and he was known to have been struggling financially at the time of their disappearance. This gave investigators a potential motive for the crime. Merritt's financial troubles were significant. He had a long history of debt, and his business ventures had failed to bring in substantial profits. He owed money to multiple people, and it seemed that he had become desperate. In addition to this, Merritt had been trying to establish his own fountain design business, and he saw the McStays' business as a potential source of income. However, Joseph McStay had been hesitant to fully partner with Merritt, and there were indications that the two men had tension in their relationship. As investigators delved deeper into Merritt's financial history and connections to the McStay family, they found several troubling inconsistencies in his statements. He had been one of the first people to claim that the McStays had left voluntarily and started a new life, but the discovery of their bodies in Mexico made this claim seem suspicious. The investigation, a closer look at Merritt's authorities, began to scrutinize Merritt's every move leading up to the McStays' disappearance. They discovered that Merritt had lied about his whereabouts and his involvement with the family. In the days before the McStays were killed, his phone records, bank transactions, and testimony did not align with the timeline of events. Additionally, the forensic evidence collected from Merritt's home and car linked him to the crime. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was a call log that showed Merritt had been in contact with Joseph McStay in the days leading up to the disappearance. Merritt had also tried to sell the McStay's business without their permission, and this raised suspicions that he might have been trying to profit from their disappearance. In 2019, Merritt was officially charged with 4 counts of murder. He was arrested and later convicted of first-degree murder for the deaths of Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. During the trial, Merritt maintained his innocence, but the mountain of evidence against him led to his eventual conviction. The aftermath and impact case of the McStay family touched many people across the country. It raised questions about the vulnerability of families, the complexity of relationships, and the devastating consequences of financial desperation. The fact that Charles Merritt, a trusted friend, could commit such a horrific act was a shocking revelation. It forced people to reconsider the trust they place in those around them and to question how well they truly know the people they call friends. This case also highlighted the importance of forensic evidence in solving crimes and the role of modern technology in uncovering the truth. The use of phone records, bank statements, and DNA evidence played a crucial role in piecing together the events leading up to the McStay's deaths. Despite the closure brought by Merritt's conviction, the emotional impact on the McStay families, surviving relatives, and the community of Fallbrook was profound. The loss of 4 innocent lives and the subsequent discovery of the shocking truth has left a lasting mark on those who were involved in the case. Conclusion of Part 2: The McStay family's tragic fate. The mystery of the McStay family's disappearance and their eventual murder is a chilling reminder of how quickly lives can be shattered by betrayal. What seemed like a simple family disappearance turned into a complex web of lies, deception, and ultimately, murder. Charles Merritt's involvement in the crime left many wondering how such a close relationship could have ended in such a horrific tragedy. As we move forward, we will continue to explore the deeper implications of this case, the legal proceedings, and the lasting effects on those involved. Stay tuned for the next chapter in the McStay family story as we delve into the courtroom drama, the aftermath of the conviction, and the impact this case had on the wider community. Part 3: The shocking revelation. Uncovering the truth. The investigation narrows down. Charles Merritt becomes the prime suspect. Discovery of the remains of the McStay family in November 2013 was the turning point that thrust the case from a missing person investigation into a full-fledged murder inquiry. With the bodies of Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. found in a desolate part of Mexico, questions about their murder flooded the minds of investigators and the public alike. No one expected the shocking twist that would follow. Charles Chase Merritt, a close friend and business associate of Joseph McStay, emerged as the prime suspect in the family's murder. At first, Merritt was treated as just another possible lead in the case. After all, he was someone who had a deep connection with Joseph McStay, and investigators felt it was natural to look at anyone who was close to the family. Merritt's relationship with the McStays, however, was far more complex than anyone had imagined, and as the investigation moved forward, it became clear that Merritt had a much darker side. The first indication that Merritt might be involved in the crime came when investigators started to examine his financial situation. It was no secret that Merritt had been struggling financially, and as the investigation unfolded, authorities uncovered evidence suggesting he was desperate for money. He had mounting debts, and his business ventures were failing. But the most concerning aspect of Merritt's financial troubles was his connection to Joseph McStay's business. Joseph's water fountain design business was the key to much of the wealth that Merritt had come to rely on. However, despite the friendship, Joseph had resisted full financial partnership with Merritt. Merritt had a history of financial instability and was said to have deeply resented Joseph's success. His financial woes only worsened in the months leading up to the McStay's disappearance, and it seemed that Merritt was becoming more desperate. This financial strain was likely one of the major factors that led to the fateful events of February 2010. Chase Merritt's involvement, a web of lease-own of the pivotal moments in the investigation came when the authorities started to focus more closely on Chase Merritt's behavior in the days leading up to the McStay's disappearance. They began to look at his interactions with the family and the events surrounding the last known sighting of the McStays. It became clear that Merritt had been deeply involved in the McStays' lives, both personally and professionally. Merritt had been one of the last people to have contact with Joseph McStay before he and his family vanished. The two had been working together on business projects, and it seemed that Merritt was deeply connected to the McStays' lives. Investigators examined Merritt's whereabouts and actions leading up to the disappearance and found several alarming discrepancies in his story. Merritt's account of the last days leading up to the McStays' disappearance started to raise suspicions. He claimed to have last spoken to Joseph McStay just before the family vanished, but his timeline of events didn't quite match up with the evidence. Merritt also initially denied any involvement in the family's disappearance, but the authorities began to grow suspicious about his reluctance to cooperate fully with the investigation, what truly sealed Merritt's fate as the prime suspect. However, were the inconsistencies in his statements. Initially, Merritt was reluctant to offer details about his movements during the period that the McStays went missing. His answers seemed evasive and his story didn't add up. The more investigators dug, the more they realized that Merritt had lied about key details. The most significant evidence came in the form of surveillance footage and phone records. Investigators discovered that Merritt had been using Joseph McStay's vehicle and had been in contact with him in the days leading up to their disappearance. His phone records also revealed that he had lied about certain phone calls and conversations with the McStays. What was even more chilling was the fact that Merritt's financial situation had worsened significantly in the months leading up to the disappearance. It became clear that he had financial motives for wanting to eliminate the McStays. With Joseph out of the picture, Merritt would stand to gain control of the business and possibly take over its profits. The crime scene and the forensic evidence, it was determined that Merritt was likely involved in the disappearance and subsequent murder of the McStay family. The next step was to gather forensic evidence to support the theory. The crime scene in Mexico, where the McStays' bodies were found, was critical in linking Merritt to the crime. The bodies were discovered in a remote desert area near the Mexico-California border, and forensic experts worked tirelessly to gather as much evidence as possible from the scene. The condition of the bodies suggested that they had been buried hastily, a sign that whoever had committed the murders was trying to hide the evidence quickly. The McStays were found in a shallow grave, with little attempt made to conceal the bodies beyond their quick burial. The forensic investigation revealed that the cause of death for each of the family members was consistent with blunt force trauma. They had been beaten severely before being buried. This indicated that the murders had not been quick or spontaneous. They had been calculated and brutal. The manner of death pointed to a personal vendetta. Someone close to the family, who knew them well, could have been responsible for such a violent crime. Moreover, blood evidence was discovered at various locations connected to Merritt. The authorities recovered bloodstains from Merritt's vehicle and home, further linking him to the crime. This evidence painted a damning picture, showing that Merritt was directly involved in the deaths of the McStay family. Chase Merritt's arrest and trial in 2014. Merritt was formally arrested for the murder of the McStay family. The evidence against him was overwhelming: phone records, financial motives, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence. Yet, Merritt maintained his innocence, claiming that he had no involvement in the family's deaths. He continued to deny the charges even as the authorities presented a strong case against him. The trial that followed was nothing short of dramatic. Merritt's defense team argued that there were discrepancies in the investigation and that the forensic evidence was circumstantial. They attempted to paint Merritt as a victim of a flawed investigation, but the evidence against him was too strong to ignore. In 2019, after a lengthy and highly publicized trial, Merritt was found guilty of all charges. He was convicted of first-degree murder for the deaths of Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. The jury found that Merritt had planned and executed the murders, motivated by a desire for financial gain. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought some closure to the case, but it also raised unsettling questions about the nature of trust and betrayal. Merritt had been a longtime friend of the McStays, and yet he had turned on them in a way that was both shocking and brutal. The case also highlighted the fragility of relationships and how financial pressures and personal desperation can push someone to commit unspeakable acts. The impact of the case, lessons learned: murder of the McStay family, left a deep scar on the community of Fallbrook and on everyone who followed the case. It was a chilling reminder of how friendships and business relationships can sometimes be based on hidden agendas, and how the pressures of life, whether financial, emotional, or psychological, can bring out the worst in people. For the McStays, friends and family, the case was a traumatic reminder of how life can change in an instant. They had lost 4 members of their family in a brutal act of violence, and the perpetrator was someone they had trusted. The grief was compounded by the fact that it took so long to uncover the truth. The investigation into the McStays' deaths stretched on for 4 years, and during that time, loved ones were left without closure. For law enforcement, the case was a testament to the importance of investigating all leads and questioning everyone involved, even when that person seems trustworthy. The case also emphasized the significance of forensic evidence and how technology, from phone records to DNA analysis, can play a crucial role in solving crimes. Conclusion of Part 3. The monster within story of the McStay family is one of unimaginable betrayal and loss. It serves as a stark reminder of the hidden darkness that can exist in the most trusted relationships. The McStays, like so many other families, never imagined that a friend could be capable of such a heinous crime. It is a tragedy that forever changed the lives of those who knew them and sent a chilling message about the dangers of unchecked desperation and betrayal. As we continue to explore the ramifications of this case, we will look at the impact it had on the wider community, the legal proceedings that followed, and how the McStay family's story continues to serve as a cautionary tale about the fragility of trust and the destructive power of greed. Part 4. The Trial and Conviction. The dark truth behind the McStay family murders trial begins. Merritt faces justice after the shocking discovery of the McStay family's remains and the overwhelming evidence linking Charles Chase Merritt to the crime. The case finally reached its most critical point, the trial. Merritt was formally charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder for the brutal killings of Joseph McStay, his wife Summer McStay, and their 2 young children, Johnny and Joseph Jr. The road to this moment had been long and fraught with emotional and legal complexities, but it was now time for Merritt to face justice. The trial began in 2019, and it immediately drew significant public attention. The case had been under investigation for 4 years, and it had become a media sensation. The McStay family's tragic disappearance had captured the hearts of the public, and many had followed the case closely. Now that the truth about the murders was coming to light, everyone was eager to see if the man who had once been a friend of the McStays would finally be held accountable for his actions. Merritt's defense, denial at least from the outset. Merritt's defense team maintained that their client was innocent, claiming that the evidence against him was circumstantial and that there were discrepancies in the investigation. Merritt himself vehemently denied any involvement in the deaths of the McStays. He argued that the entire investigation was flawed and that the authorities had wrongly targeted him as a suspect due to his close relationship with the family. Merritt's defense strategy relied heavily on dismissing the forensic evidence that had been gathered against him. They attempted to cast doubt on the DNA and phone records that linked him to the crime, suggesting that these pieces of evidence were either misinterpreted or unreliable. However, as the trial progressed, it became increasingly clear that Merritt's explanations were not adding up. The most crucial evidence against Merritt was the forensic evidence, including DNA found on the McStay's vehicle and traces of the victim's blood discovered in his truck. In addition to this, Merritt's phone records placed him near the scene of the crime on the day of the murders. His attempts to hide key information, such as his whereabouts and interactions with the McStays in the days leading up to their disappearance, only fueled the prosecution's case against him. Despite his denials, it was evident that Merritt had been actively involved in the deaths of the McStay family. His motive of financial struggle, his resentment of Joseph McStay, and his desire to take control of the McStay family's business was undeniable. It was clear that Merritt's greed and desperation had driven him to commit an unthinkable act of betrayal. Prosecution's case, a web of lies and betrayal. The prosecution's case was methodical and carefully constructed using forensic evidence, witness testimony, and Merritt's own words against him. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was the financial motive. Merritt had long been in financial trouble, and he saw an opportunity to gain from Joseph McStay's business after his death. Merritt had been heavily involved in the fountain business that Joseph McStay had built, while Joseph had been more cautious about business dealings and had resisted fully partnering with Merritt. It was clear that Merritt had been anxious to take control. Joseph's refusal to grant Merritt more control over the business was likely one of the factors that led Merritt to murder his friend and business partner Dot in the months leading up to the murders. Merritt's financial situation had deteriorated significantly. He owed substantial amounts of money, including debts to friends and creditors. His mounting debts, combined with his dissatisfaction with Joseph's control of the business, created a perfect storm for Merritt. The prosecution argued that greed, coupled with a sense of entitlement, was Merritt's driving force. Merritt had also tried to sell business equipment and assets that belonged to the McStays after their disappearance. This was one of the key pieces of evidence that pointed to Merritt's guilt. It suggested that Merritt didn't just murder the McStays, he had also been trying to profit from their deaths. The fact that he was trying to liquidate assets that he did not own further supported the theory that Merritt had a financial motive in the murders. Another pivotal aspect of the prosecution's case was the testimony of witnesses who had interacted with Merritt in the days leading up to the murders. These witnesses described Merritt as being anxious and agitated, which aligned with the idea that he was struggling with mounting financial pressures. In addition to his financial troubles, Merritt's behavior toward the McStays became more suspicious as time went on, with some witnesses claiming that he had become increasingly secretive and distant. The forensic evidence found on the McStays' property and in Merritt's home was also a key factor in the prosecution's case. The investigators discovered traces of the McStays' blood and DNA on Merritt's vehicle, suggesting that he had been in contact with their bodies or had transported them after the murders. This evidence was overwhelming, leaving little doubt about Merritt's involvement. Merritt's motive, greed, and desperation. As the trial unfolded, the prosecution began to paint a chilling picture of Merritt's motive. For them, the financial motive was the driving force behind the murders. Merritt had not only been struggling with debt, but had also seen an opportunity to profit from his long-standing relationship with the McStays. The murder of Joseph McStay, his wife, and their 2 children appeared to have been a calculated act of greed. Merritt had been living beyond his means, taking on more debt than he could repay. He had tried to start several businesses, all of which had failed. In addition, Merritt's personal finances were in complete disarray. In the weeks leading up to the McStays' disappearance, Merritt had started to worry about how he would handle his debts. This financial desperation likely led him to believe that murdering Joseph McStay would give him the financial freedom he desperately sought. Merritt's failed business ventures and debts were the perfect storm for him to take drastic action. He had come to rely heavily on Joseph's business for his own livelihood, and the refusal to give him control over the McStay family business may have pushed him to commit murder. Merritt was financially struggling and saw Joseph's business as his only way out. When his friend refused to give him more control, he may have felt that there was no other option but to eliminate Joseph and his family. The motive was clear: money. Merritt believed that by killing the McStays, he could gain control of their business and rid himself of his mounting debts. The shocking nature of the crime underscored the lengths that Merritt was willing to go to in order to escape his financial struggles. The murder was not an impulsive act, it was carefully planned and executed with a sense of entitlement and desperation. The verdict: a shocking conviction. After several months of hearings, testimony, and mounting evidence, the jury finally rendered its verdict in 2019. Merritt was found guilty of all charges related to the murders of Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. The conviction was the culmination of years of investigation, during which investigators had pieced together a web of lies, deceit, and betrayal. The jury deliberated for hours before returning their decision. The evidence was irrefutable. Merritt had murdered the McStays, driven by financial greed and a desire for control. The fact that Merritt had been a trusted friend of Joseph McStay made the crime all the more shocking and heartbreaking. Merritt was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing was a bittersweet moment for the McStay family's surviving relatives. While they had achieved some semblance of justice, the pain of losing their loved ones remained fresh. Joseph McStay's mother, Susan McStay, had spoken out throughout the trial, and while the conviction provided some closure, it didn't erase the anguish of losing her son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren in such a violent way. The aftermath, what we learned from the McStay custody trial and conviction of Charles Merritt, served as a stark reminder of the depths of human greed and the betrayal that can come from the people we trust most. The McStay family case also underscored the importance of forensic evidence in solving complex crimes. Without the DNA analysis, phone records, and financial evidence, it's unlikely that Merritt would have been convicted. The case highlighted the role of modern technology in criminal investigations and the need to examine all aspects of a person's life when seeking justice. For the community of Fallbrook and the McStay family's surviving relatives, the conviction of Charles Merritt brought some closure, but it was a bittersweet victory. The pain of losing loved ones to such an act of betrayal can never truly be healed. The McStay's tragic story serves as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of greed and the hidden dangers that may lie behind even the most trusted relationships. As we reflect on this case, it's clear that the truth behind the McStay family's murders is both tragic and haunting. Their deaths are a reminder that even those closest to us can turn into the very people who bring us the most harm. Part 5. The aftermath and lasting impact of the McStay family could see the emotional toll. Surviving family members and the community. Conviction of Charles Merritt in the murders of the McStay family brought some sense of justice. But for the surviving relatives and the community of Fallbrook, the emotional toll of the tragedy was far from over. The loss of Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. had already devastated those who loved them, and the long years of uncertainty that followed only deepened the grief. The trial and conviction of Merritt, while an essential step in the process of justice, could never fully heal the wounds left by such a horrific crime. For Joseph McStay's mother, Susan McStay, the pain was profound. She had spent years in agony, not knowing whether her son and his family had been kidnapped, run away, or met a tragic end. She held on to hope that one day they would return, but when the truth came to light, it was a devastating blow. The revelation that a trusted friend had been the one to murder her son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren was unbearable. Susan had spent years advocating for justice, and the trial became her chance to seek accountability for her family's deaths. During the trial, Susan publicly spoke about how the loss had affected her life. The media attention, the constant reminders of the tragedy, and the absence of her loved ones weighed heavily on her. Yet, in the face of all this pain, Susan showed remarkable strength, not only standing by her belief in justice, but also raising awareness about the importance of community and the strength of familial love. While the conviction of Merritt provided some closure, The pain of losing her son and grandchildren would never be fully alleviated. For the Fallbrook community, the shockwaves of the McStay family's murders reverberated for years. Fallbrook, a quiet town where crime was rarely a major concern, was forever changed by the brutal deaths of four beloved residents. The McStay family had been seen as model citizens active in the community, caring and deeply committed to one another. The tragedy left a void in the town that could never be filled. The case also caused many to rethink the nature of their own relationships and trust. The shocking betrayal of a close friend turned murderer was an example of how greed and financial desperation can lead people to act in ways no one would ever expect. The legal and social implications. The case as a wake-up call McStay family murders raised significant legal and social questions, and its aftermath became a catalyst for further discussions on issues like financial pressures, betrayal, and murder within close relationships. Legal implications. One of the key takeaways from the case is how long it took to find justice for the McStays. Although the case was eventually solved, it took for years to uncover the truth and arrest the perpetrator. This period of uncertainty was incredibly painful for the surviving family members, but it also highlighted the importance of patience and perseverance in investigative work. The case was a reminder of how financial motive can drive people to extreme actions and how investigators must examine every aspect of a suspect's life to understand their motive. While the forensic evidence, such as DNA and phone records, played a major role in solving the case, there were also lessons to be learned about the importance of questioning close relationships. Merritt's involvement in the murders emphasized the potential for danger in seemingly trustworthy relationships. His close friendship with Joseph McStay had, at one point, seemed to be one of mutual respect and trust, but greed and resentment drove him to commit the unthinkable. Investigators, in hindsight, noted that they should have examined Merritt's finances and his relationship with the McStays more carefully at the outset, which may have shortened the investigation. Social implications. Socially, the case sparked a broader conversation about how financial stress can affect people's mental states and decision-making. Merritt's extreme actions murdering a family he knew well to take control of their business highlight the destructive nature of greed and financial pressure. This case showed how the pursuit of quick financial relief could have devastating consequences. It also prompted discussions on how debt and financial instability can negatively impact a person's mental well-being and behavior, leading to violent actions when pushed to extremes. A family's legacy. Remembering the McStays in the years following the trial and Merritt's conviction, the McStay family was not forgotten. Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. remained deeply loved by the community, and their memory lived on through the people who remembered them fondly. Their story, marked by both heartbreak and betrayal, continues to serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of greed and the fragility of trust. Joseph McStay was remembered as a kind and creative man who worked hard to provide for his family. Summer, a dedicated mother and wife, was cherished for her love of her children and her devotion to family life. Johnny and Joseph Jr. were innocent young boys who had their whole lives ahead of them before they were tragically taken. For those who knew them, it was not just a matter of seeking justice for their deaths, it was also about ensuring their legacy lived on. In the years following the trial, Susan McStay and other family members worked hard to ensure that the McStay family's memory would not be overshadowed by the horrific manner of their deaths. They have supported various charitable organizations, contributed to victim advocacy groups, and continue to work toward raising awareness about the consequences of financial struggles and the potential for financially driven crime. The McStay family's tragic and also inspire those close to them to advocate for better mental health resources. For individuals who are under extreme financial stress, the McStay story is a reminder that even people who seem to have it all together can face emotional turmoil that, when left unchecked, can lead to dangerous and extreme decisions. The media's role in the McStay case. Ethical considerations. As the McStay case gained national attention, the role of the media became a significant issue. The media frenzy surrounding the McStay's disappearance and subsequent murders was enormous. And for the surviving family members, this added another layer of grief. Susan McStay, in particular, had to endure the constant presence of cameras, reporters, and the intense scrutiny of the case. While the media's attention was crucial in keeping the case in the public eye, it also brought ethical dilemmas to the forefront. The public's insatiable need for true crime stories can often lead to the exploitation of victims' families, who are subjected to invasive reporting and constant speculation. For the McStay family, the sensationalized nature of the media coverage was a constant reminder of their loss. The case also raised questions about how the media should handle ongoing criminal investigations. How much should the public know before all the facts are available? How does constant media coverage affect the integrity of an investigation? For the McStay family, the answer was clear. While justice was necessary, privacy and respect for the victim's legacy should always come first. Conclusion: the McStay family's tragic legacy. McStay family case is a tragic and unsettling reminder of the dark side of financial pressures and the dangerous power of greed. It also serves as a powerful lesson in the importance of trust and how even the closest relationships can turn dangerous when driven by the wrong motivations. Charles Merritt's actions forever altered the lives of those who loved the McStays, leaving behind not just a brutal crime, but a legacy that still affects everyone who followed the case. The McStay family story, though filled with heartbreak, is also one of resilience and love. It is a reminder that, while we can never fully understand the motivations behind such heinous acts, we must continue to seek justice and ensure that the victims are not forgotten. Joseph, Summer, Johnny, and Joseph Jr. may have lost their lives in the most horrific of ways, but their story is one that will continue to resonate with those who remember them and strive to protect future generations from the dangers of unchecked greed and betrayal. As we reflect on this case, it is crucial to remember the lessons learned from the McStay family tragedy, the importance of mental health, the necessity of financial transparency, and most importantly, the irreplaceable value of trust. This family, like so many others, was forever changed by the betrayal of someone they trusted, and the lessons from their story will continue to influence the way we look at relationships, crime, and justice for years to come. In Part 5, the McStay family's legacy, and the ongoing conversation, this section focuses on the lasting impact of the McStay case, from the emotional toll on surviving family members to the legal and ethical considerations surrounding the case. It also highlights the importance of justice for the victims and the need for change in how society deals with financial pressures, mental health, and trust. The McStay's legacy is one that will never be forgotten, and their story continues to resonate as a cautionary tale for future generations. Conclusion: the legacy of the McStay case and the lessons learned at the McStay family case shop not only the Fallbrook community, but also served as a wake-up call to society about the seriousness of betrayal in close relationships and the painful consequences that greed and financial motives can lead to. The fact that Charles Merritt, a close family friend, became the perpetrator of this crime revealed a chilling truth. Sometimes betrayal can come from the people you trust the most. Although the legal case concluded with Merritt's conviction, the McStay family story is more than just a criminal case. It is a lesson in the importance of trust, the destructive power of greed, and how financial pressures can push individuals to make tragic decisions. While justice was served with Merritt's conviction, the pain of losing 4 innocent lives in such a horrific way will never fully be healed. From this case, we can take away important lessons about controlling greed, valuing relationships, and most importantly, the need to address financial pressures before they lead to disastrous decisions. The McStay family's legacy will always serve as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed and betrayal, and the need for financial transparency and personal integrity in relationships. Call to action: if the story of the McStay family has helped you understand the hidden dangers in close relationships, don't forget to like and share this video to raise awareness among your friends and loved ones about the importance of trust and caution in our personal lives. Make sure to subscribe to the Room 57 channel to keep following our in-depth analysis of real-life crime cases. We're here to bring you gripping stories and profound insights that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Also, don't forget to comment below and share your thoughts on this case, or suggest any other true crime stories you'd like us to cover in future videos. Thank you for being a part of the Room 57 community. We will be back with more engaging and thought-provoking content in our upcoming videos. Remember to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our latest uploads.